Déjame llevarte para que los veas. Ahí está la carpeta, yo ya les subí la información. Let me show you. Let me show you here. Where is it? This over here. Trabajos assessment, aquí está. Ok, ustedes entran ahí. Si ustedes entran aquí, chicos, entonces van a ver, aquí está. Aquí están todos los temas. Spread the revolution, the industrial revolution, nationalism, World War I and II, war, and the last one toward the present dates. Vocabulary, son 6 vocabulary, son 6 assessments. So those are that you need to send it to me in order. And this is the rubric that I'm going to use it in order to evaluate your assignment. Okay.
Right,
this is a Dropbox, so you have to load up all this information through this Dropbox in la carpeta esta. Got it, guys? Okay, now let's okay. I found this video that tried to summarize these 3 very important. We usually, when we study history, we focus on civilization from the other side, from the ocean. Usually Egyptian, Rome, Athens, Chinese and Indian civilization. I don't know why we don't focus on American civilization. And this is the interesting thing is that the structure like this one, as you said, Mayas and Aztecas, they built this structure, and this resembles the one that was in Egypt. And how it happens, that's a mystery. So that's why it's very interesting, these cultures, okay? The Maya, the Aztecs, was in Mexico, the Maya in Honduras, and the Incas in South America, especially in Peru, okay? So let's watch this video that tries to summarize these 3 very important civilizations that took place here in America, okay, guys? Pay attention.
Alrighty, let's cover the great civilizations of the New World, from the time before the Old World made the New World new by killing most of the New World and reconstructing it to be way more Old Worldy. Yeah, that's a mouthful. Anyway, 3 great civilizations: the Inca, the Aztec, and the Maya. The Maya, the Inca, and the Aztec? Okay. Aztec, Maya, Inca? Hey, nice. Okay, next problem. What's the difference between them? Because before I started researching this video, I honestly couldn't tell you either, because so often their stories are only told insofar as they relate to the Spanish conquest of the Americas. So we hear a lot about human sacrifices and smallpox, but not so much anything else, and they all kind of blend together. But these societies were highly complex and had their own histories long before the conquistadors showed up, and they were also completely unique and distinct from each other. The Maya have been around on the Yucatan Peninsula for basically ever, and were subsistence farmers for almost the whole time. But their great cities mostly disappeared before the Spanish ever arrived. The Aztec Empire was born from a triple alliance of city-states in central Mexico, and they built up an amazing capital city in Tenochtitlan. Unlike the Maya, the Aztecs only lasted for about 100 years before the Spanish wiped them out. And finally, the Inca were from South America, not Mexico, and they lived almost entirely in the western coastal mountains for over a century before the Spanish showed up. So we're dealing with a decent amount of variety here, and it's part of what makes it really cool. So before we jump into this, we should also take a look at what sources we're working with. Archaeology in most cases is pretty good, but in this specific instance, we're also lucky enough to have decent written accounts. The Maya and the Aztecs both had pictographic writing, although it took us a good long while before we could actually translate any of it. First, we figured out numbers in the Mayan calendar, and then in the mid and late 1900s we were able to translate more of the Maya script and discover that their writing system was syllabic rather than alphabetic. And lucky for us, it turns out that a lot of the texts contain dynastic records, so the Maya actually recorded their own history, which is really cool. The reason we still have a lot of Mayan writing is because a lot of it was written on surfaces like temple walls, ceramics, and the occasional staircase. The Aztec writing system is a trickier topic though, since the Aztecs weren't quite around for long enough to create a fully fleshed out writing system. From the surviving codices we have, we know that they certainly liked writing, but I say surviving because Spanish Christians burned almost all of their texts before incidentally also murdering almost everybody, which By the way, anyone in any situation who decides that burning information is a good idea is just being a dick. There's no two ways about that. Luckily, we still know a decent amount about the Aztecs on account of Spanish writings about them. Meanwhile, the Inca themselves didn't actually have a writing system. They instead had this really cool thing called a quipu, a collection of knotted cords of different lengths and colors used to record and convey information. Quipus contained all sorts of numerical information, like dates and events and whatnot, but we still mostly can't decipher them, so it's a mystery. Our other information on the Inca comes, again, mostly from the Spanish. So, are the Spanish accounts of these civilizations biased and or more likely to portray things in a more negative or exoticized light? Probably in some cases, yeah. But they're the best we have, so they'll have to do. Now that we've got that sorted, let's go one by one and look at some proper history. The Aztec and the Inca are actually relative latecomers to the party, as they really only came along in the centuries immediately prior to the Spanish arrival. Those two are contemporaneous with the Renaissance. So it is super inaccurate to label those two as way ancient like we subconsciously tends to do. The Maya, however, are crazy ancient, but not quite as crazy ancient as the Olmec civilization, the first fancy civilization in all of Mesoamerica, which flourished for 2,000 years between 1500 BC and about 400 AD. Now that is old. While we have a fair amount of Olmec art and statuary thanks to our old pal archaeology, they're still decently mysterious, which makes sense given how old they are. Slightly less old than the Olmecs is the central Mexican city of Teotihuacan, which is similarly shrouded in mystery and uniquely cool for how huge and well designed it was. Its most famous building, the Pyramid of the Sun, was built in the 1st century AD, but aside from the building remains in the city, we really don't know a lot about it, like who built it or who lived there. The presence of some shattered statues points to evidence of some variety of popular uprising near the end of the city's life, but still, not a lot to go on. Also, it might have been a trade empire? Again, we don't really know, but it's big, it's old, it's cool, and it was probably the inspiration for most of the subsequent Mesoamerican culture as we understand it now, so it's worth a mention. Anyway, back to the Maya. Agriculture in the Yucatan Peninsula developed in the 2nd millennium BC, and by about 500 BC they had huge and awesome cities. In the centuries following 250 AD, the Maya were out in full force, building giant monuments covered in writing, connecting cities with trade, and just generally being an awesome civilization. This is impressive because it's just kinda cool, but also because it was really hard to live in the Yucatan Peninsula. It's an exposed coral reef that's basically impossible to farm conventionally, so they had to practice slash and burn agriculture, where they slash down vegetation and then burn it to infuse the soil with enough nutrients to sustain crops for a few years before moving on to another plot of land and letting the old forest regrow. Adding to the trickiness, rivers don't really form in limestone, so the only naturally available sources of water were sinkholes, called cenotes. So a lot of really intricate hydraulic engineering went into making the Yucatan livable. And if that all sounds labor-intensive, it's because it is. It's a minor miracle that the Maya were able to build the kinds of settlements they did with such inhospitable land. So while the Maya spent the centuries between 250 and 900 AD trying not to die of hunger and thirst on a regular basis, they were practicing their religion, which is really interesting in how heavily cyclical it is. They believe that the world went through cycles of creation and destruction, and most of their deities have some hand in the cyclicality of the universe. The Maya also thought that no beginning or end was definite, and that when someone died, they went on a journey through the underworld and the heavens before showing back up on Earth, which may serve to explain why they were so chill with sacrifice. The sacrificing was also predominantly a priestly measure to delay the rebirth of the world and the collapse of the world as they knew it. But while their mythology may have thought that nothing has an end, history had other plans for the Maya. A series of droughts contributed to a gradual decline of Maya culture in the southern Yucatan Peninsula. Cities were mostly abandoned due to a likely mix of too many people and too little water. In the centuries after, the Maya gravitated towards the northern Yucatan, where water was more consistently available. Cities like Chichen Itza and Mayapan became the dominant urban centers in the later centuries. Even still, those cities also gave way in the 12th and 15th centuries respectively, so by the time the Spanish showed up in the 16th century, there wasn't much left to conquer. So that's the Maya for you. Real slow burn on that one. The Aztec to the northwest had a much faster history. In the 12th and 13th centuries, a series of independent city-states began cropping up around the Texcoco Lake Valley in what is today central Mexico. One such group of people, the Mexica as they called themselves, settled into an island in the middle of the lake and founded the city of Tenochtitlan in 1325. The city and the culture developed and spread over the next century as trade increased and cultural and religious influence grew. In 1428, the Mexica formed an alliance with two other nearby peoples, and the newfangled Aztec Empire began to expand their territory and conquer their neighbors. This wasn't terribly bothersome for them because their warriors were really skilled. Not only did they conscript all adult males for fighting, but they used warriors from allies and conquered territories too. Plus, their elite jaguar and eagle warriors were especially fearsome. In the course of conquering a majority of southern Mexico, Tenochtitlan, the capital, became only more and more splendid. Much like Venice, the city was an island and it was dotted with canals in addition to its huge temples. It's been estimated to have been several times as big as contemporary London, approximately the size of late medieval Paris. Yeah, that's big. And I mean, look at it. That is one pretty city. The Aztec also played a game that the Maya were known for, called Pocatoc. The game apparently involved getting a rubber ball into a high hoop without the use of hands or feet. The game was highly ritualized and meant a lot to the people who watched and played it. The end of the game involved some variety of sacrifice, but we're not quite sure who it would have been or for what purpose. Unlike the gradual decline of Maya cities, the Aztecs lasted right up until the Spanish arrived. And since the Aztecs, unlike the Maya, were an empire, that meant that the Aztecs ruled over a lot of people who thought that they were massive knobs. So when Spain showed up and decided to take everything the Aztecs owned, and also their lives, they stoked rebellions among the Aztecs' often annoyed subjects. Uprisings plus smallpox plus guns made for a fairly quick imperial turnover. But while blood was flying everywhere in Mexico, there was an interesting debate going on in Spain. See, while genocide definitely happened during the New World's conquest, some people were debating its merits and whether or not it was justified. A guy named Sepulveda argued that the Aztecs were bad because of how much sacrifice they did, and Spain had the moral authority to kill them in retribution. But a guy named De las Casas argued that the Aztecs were their own people with their own ways, and it wasn't for Spain to step in and decide what was right and wrong. It's really neat to see what types of arguments each side was providing, as it gives us an interesting insight into the Spanish colonial mindset. The conquistadors are rightly given a lot of flack for all of their conquisting and genociding, but we should recognize that the morality of genocide was at least on their minds. It's a start, right? With Mexico covered, let's jump south and talk about the Inca. The Inca Empire began with the once small kingdom of Cusco in the mountains of Peru, and it started expanding in 1438 to ultimately cover much of South America's west coast. Seriously, this thing was huge. It might have even been the world's biggest empire at the time. Even more impressive, it was multi-ethnic, and it incorporated people through diplomacy as well as outright conquest. The Inca government was very specifically formulated and highly efficient, but the Inca, like we said, had no writing. So, well done. If having no writing was tricky, imagine what it was like building huge stone cities on the tops of mountains with no wheels. Yeah, the Inca hauled everything up those mountains with llamas and people. If mountainous cities weren't crazy enough on their own, the Inca also had a network of hundreds of suspension bridges made only from woven fibers that ran all across the mountains. Their fiber working was so refined that they could even make seaworthy boats out of it. The Inca infrastructure, which is amazingly well adapted to the mountain-covered coast, is almost entirely a result of their excellent central government. Terrace farming was also a huge factor in the ability of the Inca to live in such mountainy terrain. Also, in the middle of all this, they figured out how to freeze-dry food, and were also performing consistently successful brain surgery. So there's that. Much like with the Aztecs, the Spanish showed up in the 1500s with intents to wreck shop and colonize everything. And they did. An Incan civil war and the outbreak of smallpox immediately prior to the Spanish arrival certainly made conquering easier for them. In the centuries after, Spain would import tons upon tons of gold and silver from the New World, and absolutely destroy their economy with inflation, sending them on a lovely one-way ride to geopolitical irrelevance within a century. I'm not saying karma, but it kinda seems like karma, don't you think? Anyway, that's Mesoamerica for you. Maya, Aztec, and Inca. Hey, there we go!
Okay, with this video that I found here in YouTube, I try to summarize these three civilizations that lived years ago. Now let's conclude this chapter. We have like 9 minutes. I'll try to summarize this presentation. Even though you're not gonna have only until the Aztecas, sorry, until the Mayas. That's tomorrow's test. I'm gonna include that information for your exam and also for your test. So, but anyway, I just wanted to show you because this three civilizations are very important in our American history, okay? So the first one was the Mayas, and they developed in this area of Peninsula of Yucatan, where we are expecting to hit this hurricane that is coming. It's gonna enter to this area, around this area. So it was, like it says, Gulf of Honduras. So it says it was here in Honduras, developed these the Mayas. They developed in that area. The interesting thing is that the structure is similar to the ones in Egypt. You see, like that, as you see. And also, like it says over here, there was a very important city called Palenque, where, like it says, Pacal it was a king, one king. It says King Pacal had the temple built and as a ruler. He became king of the Maya city of Palenque when he was just 12 years old. So can you imagine, he was very young and he became the king of that city, that area that belongs to the Mayas, okay? The funny thing over here is that like they used to play this kind of sport, like soccer, like you see over here. In the important cities in the Maya civilization, you could find something like this one. Like it was like a soccer court. Like they say over here, look what it says. The Maya believed that the gods rewarded the winning teams. O sea, los equipos que ganaban lo iban a recompensar. ¿De qué manera? A su ciudad, dice. With fertile soil, con tierra fértil y muchos productos agrícolas. Plentiful crops. However, sin embargo, mira, the captain of the losing team, el capitán del equipo perdedor, was often sacrificed to the god. O sea que imagínate, si tú eres entrenador de ese equipo perdedor, tú sabes cuál era el resultado. Te van a sacrificar.
En este caso nadie quería ser.
Sí, así que nadie quiere ser entrenador del perdedor, todos querían ganar.
Ey, no, qué locura. O sea, le meten,
Bueno,
supongamos que le meten una goleada al perdedor.
Sí, así era en esos tiempos. Aquí vemos una gráfica de la sociedad, como era igual. Era más o menos similar como las demás. El rey arriba, después los guerreros. Pero aquí vemos, aparte de también de las diferentes logros que ellos lograron los mayas, que ellos descubrieron dos tipos de calendarios, solar y lunar, los calendarios. A ver si aquí lo tenía. No, aquí no lo tengo. Pensaba que lo tenía. Lo borré. Yo traté de resumir todo esto y yo tenía otra presentación que hablaba sobre los priests, que eran muy importantes. Los priests, ellos trabajaban de la mano del rey. Anyway. Ahora vienen los aztecas que se desarrollaron. Ellos inicialmente se desarrollaron en esta área al norte al sur de Estados Unidos, acá en esta área, y después se movieron para acá, para el sur de México. Aquí está la estructura social, los reyes, los priests, los merchants y los farmers. No, miento. Acá los priests eran muy importantes, eran en la civilización azteca. ¿Por qué eran importantes? The Aztec priests had high position in society because they fulfill many duties. Muchos trabajos tienen que hacer. The priests kept calendars and decided when to plant crops or perform ceremonies. Ellos eran los que decidían cuándo se iba a cultivar y cuándo se hacían las ceremonias. Priests passed down Aztec history and stories to keep their traditional alive. And priests performed various religious ceremonies, including human sacrifices. También ellos creían en los sacrificios humanos en aquella época. Miren, que yo no sabía que la ciudad de Tenochtitlán era como una Venecia, Eso es lo importante de esta civilización, que el grado de imaginación y de construcción y de ingeniería que tenían ellos porque esto era una especie de una laguna y ahí ellos crearon una especie de una ciudad, con sus puentes atravesando y una especie de una Venecia, que yo en realidad yo no sabía porque nunca me había metido a estudiar, porque aquí en Panamá no sé por qué no se adentra mucho en la historia de estas civilizaciones y fueron tan impresionantes como las de Europa y como las de Medio Oriente. Imagínense, aquí en medio de todo esto, que esto más o menos como un lago, hicieron una ciudad, que era Tenochtitlán. Si cuando tengan la oportunidad de ustedes ir a México, vayan a Tenochtitlán, o si no, vayan también entonces al Palenque, que es en Honduras, para que vean estos restos de estas civilizaciones. También los aztecas, también ellos crearon su calendario solar. Y también hicieron una especie de como ellos cultivaban en medio de una especie de como una Venecia. Ellos cultivaban. O sea, el grado de nivel de conocimientos, uno pensaría de que no, ellos no tienen, pero en realidad sí. Igualmente, también cómo terminó esta civilización cuando llegó Hernán Cortés. Ellos pensaban que, según una leyenda, que iba a venir un dios y pensaron que Hernán Cortés era el dios, que iba a regresar a salvarlos a todos ellos. Sin embargo, Cortés se aprovechó de ellos. Ellos los atacaron, los aztecas los atacaron, después ellos regresaron y mataron y se robaron todo el oro, como siempre. Los españoles vinieron aquí a buscar el oro y todos los recursos que tenían los pobres indios acá en Centroamérica y Sudamérica. Ese fue el propósito de ellos, simplemente saquearnos, los europeos. Ya igualmente los incas, entonces la civilización inca, que esto es lo más impresionante, cómo ellos pudieron haber creado una ciudad de piedra en las cordilleras esto es el Cusco, imagínense, ellos cómo ellos crearon esta ciudad de piedra a esa altura. Imagínense, si yo he subido al volcán Barú y yo lo he escalado y yo nada más quedo 2, 3, 4 pasos y no puedo respirar. Pero bueno, ellos nacieron en esa área, ellos se acostumbraron y su cuerpo se ha moldado a ese clima. Bien, todo este territorio le pertenecía al imperio incaico, desde Quito hasta Chile, por acá, Santiago de Chile, y un poquito más. Toda esa área era peruana. Entonces, en aquel entonces, era un imperio, entonces, ¿quién era el que gobernaba? Era, después que murió el jefe de los incas, los hijos Atahualpa y Huáscar, se combatieron para ver quién se iba a quedar encargado de ese imperio y ganó fue Atahualpa. Atahualpa, entonces, ¿cómo se llama? Francisco Pizarro es el que llegó al imperio incaico para tratar de conocer ese imperio y le habían dicho que había mucho oro, así que él llegó allá, pero entonces el problema sucedió cuando Francisco Pizarro quiso imponerle el catolicismo, porque ellos eran politeístas a Atahualpa, y Atahualpa dijo que no, y ahí comenzó la guerra, y ahí mismo los españoles lo dominaron y exterminaron lo tomaron como esclavo a los incas. Esa es la famosa historia. Que no podemos entrar tan a fondo como me hubiese gustado, sin embargo, yo sí quería darle un gran pantallazo de estas tres importantes civilizaciones en el territorio americano. Acuérdense, mañana tenemos entonces el ejercicio y acuérdense que también tienen que ir subiendo los vocabularios y lo hacer en forma ordenada, por favor, chicos. Ordenada, porque para eso yo les subí una rubrics para que ustedes sigan las indicaciones y puedan obtener todos los puntos necesarios. ¿Alguna pregunta, chicos?
Profe, hoy que nos mostró acerca de, aparte de los mayas, también que si aztecas y tal, igual en el ejercicio, o sea, de civilización y tal, solo vienen los mayas.
Sí, solamente hasta los mayas, no se preocupen, hasta los mayas. Pero de todas maneras yo quería enseñarle a ustedes, porque yo creo que ustedes no lo tomaron, no, en el 8º grado ustedes no llegaron a esas culturas, a esas civilizaciones. Entonces, por eso que yo traté de ir rápido para poder meterle estas 3 civilizaciones para que ustedes, cultura general, esto para la cultura general de ustedes, pues, para que sepan que en realidad existieron estas 3 importantes civilizaciones en América. Pero eso no viene del examen, solamente hasta los mayas. ¿Oye? Perfecto, chicos. Entonces ya tengo que irme a otra clase que tengo ejercicio, así que nos vemos mañana en el ejercicio. Chao, cuídense.
Buen día.
Chao.
Bye. Bye.